by Attorney Sloan, followed by a discussion. We don't have an action item today, but we do have an action item on our regular commission agenda tomorrow. And we will try to get in public comment after the discussion. So, and welcome, Representative Lyman. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. All right, I will pass it over to Christina for the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Sorry that did not work to be there in person. Although for folks at home, I think this is a little bit easier. I'm going to start sharing my screen. There we go. Okay, you guys can see that? All good? You can see what I'm seeing? State of the still noisy union?
We can, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I want to start, this is going to be comprehensive. Commission, stop me at any time. The plan is to talk about, you know, how we got here, the efforts in 2020 and 2021 that Grand County made towards addressing noise pollution, the effect of the general session, the impact of Title V on any of it, and then also to address the Title V revisions, the hope being if there are questions, public comment, feedback on Title V, we can address those now versus tomorrow in the meeting, and we'll get into all of that. So this is somewhat of a State of the Union report, State of the still noisy union report. I do want to start, we've looked at these kind of graphs before, but the noise issue is real. I just want to remind everyone of that. The impact of the noise based on this, the bottom line is the 20-inch stationary test. So this is an equipment test level we're talking about. This line is the EPA full throttle acceleration test, but also an equipment test by and large. The point being that all the studies in the world will show that as noise levels increase, the noise pollution effect is really dramatic. We've set our noise ordinance limit at 92 dBA, so right around where my cursor is on this green line. And you can see that there's still a fair amount of noise and the impact of noise above that level that's extremely harmful. The point of setting at 92 was to allow stock ATV machines by and large, and to allow motorcycles that have the EPA stamp by and large, and those are going to all fall into this, you know, bottom left-hand right quadrant. And our target are these super modified, aggressively driven vehicles that fall into the rest of the graph, the noise impacting equivalent anywhere from 2 large trucks up to 50 large trucks. So we've already studied all that data for about 2 years. We've also discussed at length the public health and safety impacts of noise pollution. Of course, ATVs, we hear a lot about in Grand County. They aren't the only issue. You know, we do have a lot of dirt bikes, motorcycles coming through town, and of course the impact of the state highway and all the trucks there. So, you know, the health issues are real, they're well studied, and it's an issue that we're battling across the county in a few different ways, layers deep. It is a community issue. It's not just impacting our residents, but it's also impacting our tourism. Here, though, I focus, there's a brand new hot off the presses study that the Utah Office of Tourism partnered with the Kim C. Gardner Policy Institute at the University of Utah. This was based on a resident sentiment study in March 2022. They conducted this study in every single community and county in the state. Just some summaries, and I appreciate Kevin Walker summarizing these for us today. 68% of Moab area residents think that our tourism and use are over capacity in some places. 59% of Moab residents think the quality of life has declined due to tourism. 67% think that the effect of tourism on the natural environment is negative or very negative. 49% think that the effects of tourism on human health and safety is negative or very negative. In 2020,
Utah Office of Tourism.
Oh, Utah Office of Tourism did the study.
So it's sponsored by the Utah Office of Tourism.
Okay, thank you.
so the county heard a lot from the community in 2020 and 2021. So in 2015, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but 2015 is when the law changed to allow ATVs to become street legal. That the impact on Moab from 2015 to 2019 was increasing. I'd say even 2019 was a dramatic increase in ATV tourism in Moab. The commission in particular started to get a lot of complaints and pressure by the community to do something about it. Of course, March 2020 is when COVID made its way to Utah, and Grand County closed essentially from March to May of 2020. Once we reopened, the jump in growth in the ATV tourism even skyrocketed from there. We have not, this is public comments received between October 1, 2020 and May 31, 2021. This is, I have not compiled this information myself. This came from the Commission Administrator's Office, and they have not prioritized reviewing public comments since May 31, 2021. So that's why the time frame you see, but there were 337 emails during that time asking the commission to regulate noise. These were nearly all entirely by our residents. There were 129 other emails or letters asking CC not to regulate noise or ATVs. Only 16 of those were residents. Lots of pressure. We did not include any of the petitions. There were many, many thousands of signatures on various petitions, all of which bent to asking the commission to regulate noise and ATVs. We haven't included that information here. These are actually unique emails and letters to the commission. So how did we get here? It's a combination of policy and law in Utah statute. This is the statute that changed in 2015, and you see that effective date. The green box is what we can do, not a lot. The red box is what we can't do, which is written very broadly. A municipality or county may not prohibit or restrict the use of a street legal all-terrain vehicle on a street or highway where the use of another street legal vehicle is permitted. I don't think it's dramatic to say it shocks me that our citizens still don't understand this limitation in law. And we continue weekly, for sure, to get comments verbally or in writing by our citizens complaining that we haven't done enough. Some people go as far as to say we haven't done anything about noise and about ATV tourism. And I continue to remind folks, there's a big, fat, huge provision that impacts what we can do here. But in 2020, 2021, we still grappled with what we can do. That statute, the OHB statute, means that we can't impose ATV curfew. We did try to help change the law to allow that, and that was defeated. We can't integrate an ATV permit system. Trailer regulation is very difficult because that would be a restriction of use on the road. We can't go as far as requiring a noise level that's as quiet as a passenger car, because we can't do indirectly what we can't do directly. We can't impose residential route designations. So needless to say, it's extremely frustrating. Okay, so noise 1.0, as I'm calling it, was our 2020-2021 effort as we started to grapple with the implosion in noise pollution in the county. We imposed an OHV speed limit in about October 2020. That is now 15 miles per hour in the city, 10 miles per hour, lower than the speed limit in the county, since we have varying speed limits throughout the county. I'm only aware of one citation issued for a speed limit violation, and that was issued by Moab City Police Department. By and large, my anecdotal evidence is that people are obeying the speed limit and it is reducing noise. We of course passed a noise ordinance. We worked for 2 years collecting data. We hired a noise expert to help us with and did a massive amount of research and noise level collection to set a reasonable DBA level, consistent with regulations, consistent with state law. Unfortunately, I would say we've had zero enforcement to date by the city and county, and we'll get into why that is. The city, for one, though, has not obtained, they haven't gone through any noise metering or enforcement training. And we haven't been able to finish ours because of COVID, but the exciting news is May 10th through 12th, the sheriff's office and my lead prosecutor are finishing that training with our noise expert. Oops, sorry about that. We imposed Title V business regulations to regulate ATV fleets to minimize noise in town. I think it's important to remember that the Sandflats entrance study that was conducted, well, it's ongoing, but it began in early 2021, shows that nearly 70% of ATVs entering Sandflats recreation area are from our local business fleet. So those are both rentals and tours. And of course, an ATV can't get up to Sandflats without going through a residential neighborhood. So the concept of regulating our local business fleets was that that would go a long way towards minimizing noise in our neighborhoods. Big problem there, of course, is HB 146 that we'll discuss. Plus the ATV special events moratorium that's ongoing. One of our goals as articulated in this time was to work with industry to make quieter vehicles, and Can-Am has come out with the Commander. The measure is 82 dBA under the stationary test, which is extremely exciting. So that's the same measurement that my 4-year-old Toyota Tacoma measures, and that is quieter than some vans and trucks that you see on our roads. County had nothing to do with that. Industry is certainly watching the Moab story. I know that some of our local businesses are working with industry as well. I want to make the point that our Noise 1.0 was heavily based on a select few lawmakers who were really engaged on it and law enforcement. And by law enforcement, that of course is prosecution and my office, but also the sheriff's office and the city police as well to a certain extent. And because of that, you can see that we focus Noise 1.0 somewhat narrowly on law enforcement type related efforts. Oh, let me see. I do want to say, because I get a lot of comments, some good, some bad, some snarky about the OHV speed limit, but the studies are undeniable that as speed increases, so does noise. Yes, there are, the ATV engine is, can at low throttle be noisy, but by and large, low speed limits, lower noise. We've gotten a lot of good feedback as well. And hopefully you guys are hearing it, that that's working. Also just want to remind folks that there are different tests, and you hear a lot of DBA numbers thrown around, and it entirely depends on what sort of noise levels you're even talking about in a big conceptual sense about what test you are talking about. Our noise ordinance requires an EPA stamp, which is federal law for a motorcycle. So federal law requires an EPA stamp on every motorcycle, street legal motorcycle or dirt bike in the United States. And that includes stock mufflers, but aftermarket mufflers. The EPA has their own test. It has to be done in a lab type setting. It cannot be done roadside. We do rely on federal law and our noise ordinance, and all we look for is that stamp. There's a stationary test, that's the equipment test. That's going to be 20 inches off your tailpipe. And then there's the operational test, which is a drive-by test. So the sheriff's office has been trained on the stationary test, which allowed us to do our voluntary noise collection event up at Sandflats last May. And that was great. We tested about 35 ATVs plus additional Jeeps, vans, vehicles, anyone who was willing to test. They got into Sandflats for free that day. So it was a really great event, and our noise expert was there. And then this next piece, and really an extremely important part of any noise enforcement on the road is going to be training on the operational test, which is 25 feet from the noise source or 50 feet as they're moving. This is taken straight out of a presentation I made before that, again, is just reinforcing that our Noise 1.0 was very law enforcement oriented. Okay, so then we get to 2022 legislative session and we get HB 146. This started out as a food truck licensing bill, and on the second to last day of the general session, it was formally amended to regulate county and city regulation of ATV vehicles. It created a new Chapter 65, and this is going to be effective this week. When you go to statute, you can't even find this chapter yet integrated in the statute. They won't load it until it's effective, which is May 4th. And it basically went through our Title V and said, you can't do that. Nope, you can't do that. Nope, you can't do that. So it's the Bramble Smackdown. Then I'd say a lot of people went through the 5 stages of grief. The Title V ATV business regulations is one small piece of the pie. It hurt for sure. And again, the numbers moving through town, the studies that we do have, the data that we do have shows that at least a huge portion of the ATVs traveling through town, east and west, east of Sand Flats and west of King Creek, are our local business fleets. But the good news is we can do it better on new noise 2.0, and some good came out of the general session as well. So Carl Albrecht, who's represented Grand County for a long time, although we've now been redistricted out of his district and into Representative Phil Lyman's district, sponsored and passed HB 180 that added some education requirements to existing OHV education course requirements. And also, so these first 2 big chunks, 4122 12.2 and 4122 12.5, were amended to impose much stiffer penalties in terms of community service and trail restoration for off-road violations and off-road damage, where an individual not only has to physically go back and help restore any damage they did, but they have to do it in that locality. They can't just go back to their home area and work with their home BLM to do some trail work. It actually has to be done on the trail and in the area where the violation occurred and where the damage occurred. And then the other cool thing is that 412231 was amended. This already required some OHV training and now requires anyone who's driving an OHV to take this online course. The online course is being developed right now by state parks, and it must include education concerning respectful, sustainable, and on-trail off-highway vehicle operation and respect for communities affected by off-highway vehicle operation. Part of our noise strategy is to help partner with state parks and the Utah Office of Tourism to help develop curriculum and education such as these. We're already doing a lot of that work through our travel council, through our active trails and transportation department, and through Sand Flats Recreation Area. So we do have a lot of skills to offer, and so far the state has been interested in working with us on that, so we are pursuing that. Noise 2.0, we've been embarked on this. We've been working ever since HB 146, ever since we heard wind of it, really, on doing it better, right? Let's start over and be more inclusive. Our noise working group this time requires a lot of folks who are doing a lot of good with education, backcountry, trail work, but also front country stuff. So it's our economic development director, a responsible recreation program manager, which is a new program within the active trail and transportation department, the GCAP director, code compliance officer, a planning and zoning director. And then we have, again, of course, our lawmakers and law enforcement involved as well. Our number one priority this time is education, 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 and massaging the messaging. We've talked about retooling, do it like a local campaign into a more substantive, meaningful campaign. Tells people more directly what responsible recreation looks like in town and out of town. Create specific content for messaging and education on that community impact issue. Of course, we have a lot of great videos on backcountry etiquette and impacts. We're working now to develop similar education for in-town impacts. We're interested in partnering with the Utah Office of Tourism for meaningful statewide responsible recreation messaging. This, of course, is already a priority of both the state but also federal agencies, given all the vandalism and damage that's occurring on our public lands. So that's a great area to partner with, and August and Ben are doing great work there. Help state parks develop the HB 180 mandated OHV course curriculum. We're actually meeting with them in the next couple of weeks as a very initial meeting to let them know what skills and expertise we have within the county that could help them develop curriculum. Of course, that curriculum is going to be statewide, but hopefully they're interested in what we can help offer. Because we think that that programming will be statewide, but they're going to model it on online hunting courses, right? So they already have a format they're going to use, and it's quite effective in hunting groups and some other groups where they're already requiring this type of education. So we want to also develop online something local, and then motivate people to go through our own local course and offer things like whip flags, stickers, a Moab Steward sticker, similar to what Red Rock Four Wheelers is doing. When you see a Jeeper with a Red Rock Four Wheeler sticker, that person's a responsible recreationalist. We want to help incentivize a program similar to that here. The Responsible Recreation Department, Active Trails and Transportation, Economic Development, they'll be the ones leading all of that. GCAT's working hard to develop a responsible recreation program. This is both for the public, but also for business. They've already launched into this. They're working on the Moab Trail Steward program, which of course is our ambassador program. And that's already on the ground and out the door. They want to expand that to also include a Moab Business Steward program. They're going to work. They have partnerships already with some non-motorized guiding companies, and they're going to start there. But in time, I think that the motorized businesses would be a phase 2 approach, but this would be a voluntary, a gold medal type program. So they are working hard to enhance that programming. Together with retooling the Do It Like a Local campaign, that same group, we'll call it the Responsible Recreation Program group, is going to be working on new slogans and messaging. Your adventure starts in town, your adventure starts in neighborhoods. These are the type of messaging and education we want to get out to just continue to remind folks, motorized users, other users, all of our tourists, to please respect Moab neighborhoods. Everyone is very interested in installing some flashing stationary noise meters in critical locations in town. This would be for education, not enforcement, at least to start. These are extremely expensive. At the same time, hiring humans is extremely expensive, especially with our housing crisis. So as we continue to not be able to fill open positions in the sheriff's office and the police department, the money to put into stationary noise meters might make sense. These are between $50,000 and $100,000 each. So it's no small fiscal impact, but it's looking more and more attractive as we move forward. Other ideas to actually get some noise enforcement done. So we're going to complete the drive-by enforcement training here soon. I don't know the city's plans to do any of that themselves. Of course, they've just hired a new police chief, so hopefully it is a priority. And then we need to increase enforcement of lots of things, not just noise ordinance, but our speed limits, the noise suppression equipment laws that are already out there, licensing and registration laws. Sheriff's office does spend a lot of time on the licensing issue. And in the season, last year we did a better job of presenting those numbers to the commission. I'm working from memory, but I do believe in each season, so say the spring season and the fall season, each one of those through the sheriff's office garnered about 60 citations for licensing and registration violations. And so, ATVs are getting pulled over, but can we do more to make sure they're complying with all our laws? And then of course, the HB 180 OHV program, there'll be a component where our ATV businesses must enforce that, but there'll also be a component where the law enforcement could enforce it as well. I added a needs to this. I think it's really important that the community copy the sheriff, the deputy sheriff, and our police chief and our assistant police chief on noise complaints. The community sends noise complaints to the commission. Often I get them as well, and that's great, but we need to continue to give this feedback to the sheriff and the deputy so that the sheriff's office can prioritize and staff deputies who are trained in noise enforcement, giving community feedback. So I have emails here, and you can get the city emails online as well. And then we just have to continue to prioritize staffing in the sheriff's office. They're still down a number of jobs. Their percentage of understaffing is similar to the police department. They just haven't gotten the same attention. And obviously housing is a big issue with trying to keep folks staffed up. So there's layers of challenges with enforcement beyond the actual difficulty of keeping guys safe, and requires 2 deputies on scene and all the other things. And then there's a lot of other ideas. This is a quick cap of some additional ones. The noise list that's in the packet even includes a few more. We do need to put effort into building better relationships with our state legislators. We have reached out to Senator Bramble, trying to bring him here. And the concept was we would make sure dates worked for Senator Bramble, and then we would obviously invite numerous others, including Representative Phil Lyman, which sounds like he's in chambers, which is wonderful. So we need to continue to work on those relationships, bringing folks to Moab. We also need to put some effort into making sure we send our leaders, but also business owners and community members up to the Capitol on a regular basis to meet with the Utah legislature. And then also partner with local business and developers who are interested in regulating or removing ATVs from our streets and roads, because they do outweigh those who support street legal ATVs, which is very different than the concept of ATV tourism in general, right? This is just a street legal issue, which is where this community is largely focused, is on that residential impact through town. Federal agency partnerships, the BLM and the U.S. Forest Service already require special recreation permits for all of their commercial permittees. So all the tour companies are going to already have an SRP. The SRP conditions are discretionary, and they are imposed by field office. So there is a caravan cap that requires 1 guide per every 5 vehicles on there, but there's more work to do in asking our federal agencies to consider additional SRP conditions. This could be to increase the ratio of guides to clients. The BLM does say they prefer 2 guides to every 5. They prefer a guide in the front and a guide in the back, but it currently is not an SRP condition. Inventory requirements, noise testing, all of these the federal government could impose as SRP conditions as well. There's been some interest in exploring permits or reservation system at Sand Flats Recreation Area. The last data I've heard was from 2020, and there was 60,000 motorized users on Hell's Revenge, just as one example. That increased dramatically in 2021. I need to follow up with Andrew to get those numbers. Signage and map app updates, which is a pretty basic thing. The city has not installed signs off some of our routes up to Sand Flats or out to King Creek to protect residential neighborhoods with signs like local traffic only, no access to Sand Flats, no access to motorized trails. This would do a lot to decrease tensions in town. It's city jurisdiction, but we need to continue to work with the city to see what we can do to help them put up these signs. Systematically engage all map apps, including all trail apps, to direct ATV traffic along major routes. I continue to hear, even as of a couple of weeks ago, that sometimes these map apps are sending folks, especially through our East Moab neighborhoods, getting confused, especially with that Oak Drive that doesn't go through. Land use regulation, we really haven't even embarked on where ATV businesses fit into land use zoning. Another issue that's come up recently is easing fencing laws along the highway and major routes to minimize noise impacts to residents. And then civil enforcement. This is the most expensive of all the ideas, because we'd have to create an entire civil enforcement division since we don't have that at the county. This would be similar to what you see in a large city that has a parking enforcement division, for example. Cities where you have speed radars that automatically issue citations. It's a very expensive thing. We're talking about probably, I've heard upwards of $1 million to create this civil division, but it's an option that would essentially make the process automatic in terms of enforcement. Title V business licensing. I'm going to stop here for a second and see if the commission has questions or discussion, but then next we want to get into the Title V revisions. We do need to bring our Title V into compliance with HB 146 on or before May 4th. So it is on tomorrow's agenda. I do want to make the point, this graphic is important. At most, I would say that local ATV business impact is, I don't know, maybe that yellow pie piece. It's one piece of many. Although I understand, especially this year, there's been a whole lot of talk about ATV businesses, but it really is just one part of the pie. So I'll stop sharing my screen for a second, see if you guys want to.
Does anyone have a comment or a question for Christina?
You think the training piece is the biggest holdup for the enforcement for the current things?
I plead the fifth. No, I do not. I think workforce capacity is huge, but there's still a lot of work to do, not with leadership necessarily, but there's a lot of work to do in the sheriff's office to emphasize the community interest in noise enforcement.
Anyone else have anything to ask Christina or a comment?
Thank you. That was precise and very clear. A good presentation. Thank you.
I especially appreciated your graphics, Christina.
Thank you. I need some like graphic designer training to make it better though. I had so many funny ideas, so I thought, but no skills to make it happen.
The rawness of it's effective.
Christina, is that presentation available for sharing?
Yeah, I can get that out.
She did. When you did the previous one, I found a copy of that. It's not on it can't be adjusted, the one I have.
I did figure out, Mary, where it disappeared to. So I now understand Google Sheets. So I can give you slides out of that old one. I figured it out.
Okay. What did Thank you.
Christina, this is Josie. I have a question. In talking about designated routes or signage that deters people from other side streets off of 4th East, what's the thinking behind the fact that all routes go through some kind of residential neighborhood? So there's always going to be a sacrifice zone.
Yeah, totally true. So if that, this is really just the noise working group has been working on this priority list. At some point soon, I think we need to get to the commission, maybe even a joint meeting of the commission city, maybe we're not there yet, where the commission prioritizes what we focus on. I will say for now, the noise working group's priority is that education, which wasn't part of our noise 1.0 strategy, at least not in a sort of a cohesive way within the county. We do a really great job of our departments doing their own thing and not always talking to each other. So we're doing a much better job this time with that piece. But you guys will get to set those priorities.
But I think I just heard you say, but that's not what we're intending to do in this workshop. That's some future discussion.
Right. Yeah, this is just dipping our toe in. And I think once the noise working group, and I think we're really close to firming it up just slightly, maybe being able to come to you with messaging and some more concrete details, then that at that point, I think is when we would seek commission input and direction.
There's nothing else. Should we get to Title 5?
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so let me share again. Okay, let's see. I tend to, how big is that for you guys? Let's see, view. I think that's as big as I can get it. How's it look? Your end?
It looks good.
It looks fine, Christine. Yeah,
Okay.
we can see it.
Okay, Title V, business licensing. We've had, of course, a Title V forever. In 2021, April of 2021 is when we passed our first big revision to that, which included new sections 5.02 and 5.03. And the red line you're going to see today, and that was amended, a minor amendment in July of last year. So what you're seeing today in this red line and the strike through is against our current Title V. Most of this is essentially removing provisions to comply with HB 146. There are a couple of new things, one of those being the sales tax affidavit. So we'll get into. This definition was discussed when we did propose tinkering with Title V in about February. And this definition was brought up. I went back, I got some comments on it. And I did go back. This is consistent with how you determine whether a county or a state under law has jurisdiction over a business. So it is consistent with law. Essentially marketing Grand County or marketing activities that occur in Grand County. The point here is because we have numerous special events that start in counties or even states outside of Grand County. So the Special Event Committee has been struggling with at what point is a special event that doesn't start in Grand County obligated to go through our special event permit process and get a temporary license. So that is what those changes are about. This Q parcel of real property is being added. This is to just hone and firm up what we are already doing with overnight accommodation businesses. So for every overnight accommodation business you have with the unique parcel number, you need a separate business license for that, that parcel. We've been doing that in practice, and there is some language not as clear as I would want it to be that already allowed us to do that. But this is just firming that up because we have had some questions from overnight accommodation businesses. These are definitions taken out of our land use code, but they weren't included about overnight accommodations and short-term businesses. This first subsection 2 here is about that issue with just cleaning up the language related to each OA with a separate parcel number requires a separate business license. Okay, the sales tax affidavit is new. You saw a version of this back in February. Back then it was included in chapter 5.02, which was motor vehicles, and chapter 5.03, which is overnight accommodations. We pulled it over into here because, of course, sales and use taxes affect more than just those businesses. We do have, I don't want to overstate it, but we have across the board pretty massive underreporting of taxes going on. The original idea of requiring the sales and use tax workshop that the Utah Tax Commission already does, they already hold those at least for a year, and they were actually willing to develop one specific for Grand County that they would just load up online, and just like, you know, this OHV course we're talking about, you would just go through the course yourself and it would spit you out a certificate at the end. Utah Tax Commission was going to create that for us under the 1.0 version of the tax workshop. The concept is that people aren't trying to fraudulently not pay their taxes, but they don't understand our complicated tax laws. So that was the concept of the workshop. That has been struck down in HB 146. The sales tax affidavit is general, and it just says, hey, you understand that you've got to pay your sales and use taxes under law, and as applicable for a particularized business use, here are some of those. So we do have an OHV rental tax that was effective as of this year. This cites to our local ordinance where it was imposed, and the Utah statute that allowed us, it's an optional sales tax that we passed. This number 2 motor vehicle rental tax has been, both of these 2 and 3 outstanding in code for quite some time. Number 3, there was an optional tax that we also passed in 2021, is effective this year. Again, if you're not a motor vehicle business, this doesn't apply to you, but this is providing notice to you that these taxes are required. Our transient room tax, of course, is for overnight accommodations. Subsection B is about paying sales and use tax on personal property used during a tour. This is for any tour. This would be a biking tour, a jeeping tour. an ATV tour, any tour. This is already required and has been longstanding in law. Publication 69 is the publication Utah Tax Commission already has. It provides very clear examples. It's very clear that any of the personal property used in a tour must be taxed, but it's not happening. We can tell it's not happening based on our sales remittances. We can't tell which businesses are not paying the taxes, but what we can tell is they're not being paid. Food consumed in a tour must also be taxed. So again, this is not imposing anything new. This is notifying businesses, hey, you need to look into this tax commission publication and this sales and use tax issue to make sure you're paying your proper taxes. Utah Tax Commission did, upon our request, create specific examples related to motorized tours, and they are in the process of updating publication 69 to include those examples. So they also looked at our tax remissions and was alarmed that it certainly shows that these taxes aren't being paid. Some legalese, hey, these sales tax rates are for your convenience only. It's your business to know what they are. And obviously, Utah law already imposes civil and criminal penalties for your failure to comply. Okay, I'm skipping ahead to contents of the application. Most of this we already require. We just didn't have it spelled out. I don't, the sales tax affidavit is listed there. There's a ATV equipment affidavit we'll discuss that's required. And then there's a couple additional things for overnight businesses, number of rooms, physical address and parcel number. These are things that by and large, we already are requiring. The city of Moab certainly is requiring as well. Okay, skipping to chapter 5.02. This is, where you're going to see the biggest changes, and this is post HB 146, which invalidated most of our old 5.02. What did survive is the business license cap, so that is still here. And that's all from the old. We've added an ATV equipment affidavit that says that they shall not alter the OEM mufflers in any way which increases the volume of the machines, that the ATVs that are used in the business have to comply with Title 11, and that they will do their part in ensuring that the OHV education course that's required by HB 180 now, that they will ensure, pursuant to law, that people renting ATVs have gone through that course, and it does not apply to people in tours. Overnight accommodations, we've also taken out the compliance with county law and enforcement. In both of these, we had a 3 strikes and you're out component, and 5.02 and 5.03, we removed both of those. And then skipping down, some really minor revisions here, which of course, for valuations, county already has a fair amount of discretion to penalize. So from there, I'll stop sharing my screen, but I might come back if it makes sense and see if the commission has any questions on that. Also in the packet was the UTC examples for publication 69 in terms of the tax. And that has, so I sent this to the chamber. We sent this to the attorney working with the ATV businesses. I think, Jacques, did you get this out to the trail groups?
I did, yeah.
Great. So we sent it to Motorized Trail Committee. And the feedback I'm getting so far is confusion about whether the sales and use tax required to be paid on personal property within a tour is a new requirement, and it is not. It is existing in law.
And I want to speak to that because I'm a member of the business community, and I've gotten a ton of questions about that in the last week since this came out. I run or for many years, I've run a bicycle shop, an outfitter, and we were audited some years ago about not paying the use tax on tours. So for at least the last 5 years, we have been paying that use tax on the entire price of the tour. So we were made aware of that at least 5 years ago. I can't remember the exact date, but and that's what I've told people. This isn't something new. A lot of people assume that it's something new, or assumed it was something new when they saw the new Title V, but it's not.
I want to make sure. So if you're on a tour, so you have someone that's leading you, and you go to a rental place, and you're on the tour, you do not have to watch the training, correct? But if you rent it and you go out individually, you do. Is that correct? Did I understand that right?
Correct. The exemption is only if you're with a guide.
So I guess I'm also confused about the tax on the personal property used during a tour. Like if someone's paying tax on the entire cost of a tour, is this an additional tax on like the lunch provided or something? Or
I think it's just a straight up sales tax on the price of the tour.
Okay.
I was under the assumption that you just paid it on the price of the tour, but I guess that would be, you could pay tax on the rental of, say, the bike that you're using on the tour, plus food you consumed on the tour, is my understanding. Is that right, Christina?
Right. So technically, it's only required on the value of the equipment used or rented during the tour, or any food consumed, or any other property consumed, right? It could be gasoline, could be any other consumable goods. Because it can be hard to break out the value of that personal property, many businesses, like Jacques' business, just taxes the tour, and then they don't have to worry about an audit on whether they've left out a consumable good or they attributed the wrong value to the equipment used. So that's why I think some people do it that way. But technically, you just need to be able to defend the value of the equipment used and the goods consumed.
And that's the standard sales tax, correct, in the county and the state, city, county, and state, right?
so are you saying then in a typical tour, there are portions of it which are not subject to any sales tax?
Right. So professional services are not subject to sales tax.
Okay, then maybe that's what I was missing.
Right. In my tours, for example, say the tour costs $100 and I rent a bike for $70, and we don't provide any food on the tour, then we could tax that tour at a rate of $70 instead of $100, right, Christina?
Correct.
Okay, and then but then also interacting with this is that for certain things like motor vehicle rentals, there's additional taxes beyond the standard sales tax, and so that for those parts of the tours, it wouldn't be the standard sales tax rate; it would be some kind of something else, right?
Right. So, for example, we have a new OHV rental tax, and then there's also a base motor vehicle rental tax.
Okay, so then just to summarize this is, some people might mistakenly assume that tours are not subject to any kind of sales tax, but in fact, typically a portion of what's going on in the tour is subject to at least some of these taxes. And if you want to be safe, you can tax the entire cost of the tour, but you can also just identify which parts.
That sounds correct, right? I imagine if you did like a scenic air tour, for example, you couldn't tax the price of the plane, correct? So you probably just tax the whole tour. Sounds
right to me. I'd also like to point out on our OHV rental tax that's effective in January 1 of 2020, so it was effective many months ago. We just got our first quarter return of $489. So that again shows that companies are not paying it. Until this effort, I don't know that the county made any effort this year to educate our businesses and or remind our businesses. So that is an effort I made with Suzette, the attorney representing ATV businesses, is to please, and the chamber, to please remind their clients and members that this OHV tax is now effective and was effective January 1, 2022.
So when UTV is rented, they have to pay CRCC taxes, right? Car and restaurant and like rentals, like the car rentals, right?
They have to pay the motor vehicle rental tax and the OHV rental tax.
Okay. That is, isn't that?
It's both. I thought it was like one or the other, whether it was classified as a regular motor vehicle rental or as a OHV.
I'll have that answer tomorrow. I think it's both, but I'll have that answer tomorrow.
I assumed it was one or the other, but they weren't overlapping taxes.
So there's a, I feel, so there is a different tax for UTVs, ATVs that is different than, say, renting a car. In addition, or is it both?
Yeah, I believe that's true. And the total rate on those two taxes, I think they both come out to 14%, you know, but it's broken down differently and the way it's distributed is different. So it does make I think a small difference to us which way they classify the vehicle rental.
Okay, I'd also like to stop. There's a couple, I don't think you guys can really see the chat there, but we've had two questions. One is from Brian. Is there a fee for that training that the county will collect? We're not requiring a training, so we're not collecting a fee. And then Lacey Shemway asked for clarity about these same taxes. And Lacey, let's punt that question to tomorrow and I'll have more clarity for tomorrow.
Thank you. Yeah, and have it written out in a way that I could visually see it, if possible.
I don't have any graphic skills, so I can't promise that. But if someone else
I just need numbers, just numbers. It doesn't have to be a graphic, but something.
You had mentioned that training that was potentially going to be created that then was abandoned. Do you know if there's an optional option for that? If people are trying to get on top of it, could they?
It's my understanding UTC wants to develop a self-paced online course anyway. So they are working on that. With that said, their experience is that it is much more valuable to the attendee because these taxes are so complicated. And if the attendee doesn't have an opportunity to engage back and forth and ask questions, then one, people don't listen as closely. And two, people walk away with questions that are unanswered. And this includes accountants and CPAs. And I did reach out because our first version about the workshop, I got very reasonable questions from businesses saying, I don't even do my own taxes. My accountant or my CPA does, can't they be exempt? And I thought that made perfect sense. So I went back to the Utah Tax Commission and said, what do you guys think about that? And they said, no, please don't. If you're going to impose a workshop requirement, please require accountants and CPAs to go through it too, because they are the majority of the folks who are filing these returns, helping businesses pay, and they get it wrong too now and then. So, the tax commission is motivated to get as many people through their workshops as possible. They know a self-paced program will increase participation. At the same time, they don't think it's good enough. So they want to wait until there's, these platforms where it forces you to engage all the way through, not just that you've watched a video and you get a certificate at the end. So it requires some real effort and funding on their part, and they're working on it.
Great. Any other questions for Christina or discussion on that?
Christina, beyond education about these tax structures, is there anything else within the county's sort of purview, or everything else just defers to the tax commission as far as compliance and auditing?
Right, we have no auditing power. This is a conversation I had with Senator Bramble about the workshop requirement. And he was really adamant that the UTC has auditing power, and for any of the bad apples, the UTC can go after him. But it's actually quite hard without real evidence to engage the UTC at the level that they need to initiate an audit of a local business. So, I do think this education is important. We can look at the information we do get, and we can tell when there is underreporting, across the board, which is an important thing for UTC to know. But it can be tricky trying to get an audit out of the UTC, that's for sure. So no, we don't have a lot of power to do anything about it.
Did you have any further presentation Christina?
No. And Lacey is asking for an explanation of what the OHV tax is used for. And we will get something printed on that. I don't know. That's a Chris Baird question, or at least I need his input on that. So I can try to get that done by tomorrow, but I'm not sure.
Hey, Christina, this is Lonnie.
Hey,
Could you also just look, I doubt you have it at your hands right now, but do we know what the cost of the added programs that you discussed earlier are going to be?
sorry, say that again.
Earlier, you spoke about several different programs, trail ambassador type programs that the
Oh.
county's putting on.
Mhm.
Do we know what that cost is going to be and where that money is going to come from?
There's no cost to the business, if that's what you mean.
No, but there will be a cost to the county.
Oh, I don't know the answer. And honestly, it's somewhat new. And I think that the Grand County Active Trails and Transportation needs to be the entity that is making that presentation. So I'll make the point that people are interested and propose that they present to the commission soon on that program. I know that the current the Moab Trail Steward, so that is our ambassador program targeted at trailheads and backcountry uses and the public, that is TRT funded. Beyond that, they're just starting to develop the business program, so I'm not sure.
I imagine it would also be TRT funded.
I would assume as well, but, okay, so Brian clarified his question. The training I was referring to was for the OHV course. That sounded like it was going to be mandatory. Is that a fee-based training? So, and if so, the county will be able to benefit from it. It is a state requirement. So it is being processed through the state DMV department. It is being created by state parks. It will be online. I have no idea if there's going to be a fee, but the county will not receive any of that fee if they do charge a fee for it.
Great, thank you. Should we open it up for public comment here if we don't have any other discussion in the commission?
I would say yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'll open this up for public comment. Let's hold it to 3 minutes. And we can go between the chamber and Zoom. Just raise your hand and I'll call on you and give you a time. Yes, Representative Lyman.
Yes.
So you might have to speak.
Right, the mic is right there in the center and it's not super
It's a
strong.
directional one.
So talk to the mic.
Right.
And I don't mean to jump right in here on the front end, much rather listen than speak, but I do want to express my appreciation for being able to come to the meeting and talk about this. This is not my district yet, and it's not my district, it's the people's district, and we'll see who gets elected to this position. But a couple of things in section 4122, it talks about what you can do and what you can't do, and I think it's pretty clear that you can't target a specific type of vehicle or a specific type of business. And so everything that I see that's presented after that seems to be talking about the problem with ATVs, And I think we're going to continue to bump up against that issue as long as we're trying to target a specific class of vehicle or a specific business. And the other thing that when we're talking about the audits that have been taking place in Grand County, I'm very curious, and I want to look and see from the tax commission standpoint if they're targeting Grand County specifically, if they're having an excess amount of audits in this county, and if those audits are specifically targeting a certain type of industry in the county. To me, that's a problem. If government starts to become a tool for pushing some ideology or something like that, then that's something from my standpoint as a legislator that I would definitely want to know the truth of. And I guess the third thing is dealing with the tax. We talk about the rental tax, the tour tax, the personal property that's involved and how that's taxed. And it seems like there's quite a bit of questions about that. Yet not enough questions that we can't say that we're underreporting. I think that's a bold statement to say we're underreporting a tax that we can't even really define what that tax means. So those are just my observations. I will say, when laws are passed that leave so much room for confusion, that's usually a sign of a poorly drafted law, and there's a lot of those at the state. So I look forward to having the discussion and to seeing if there's suggestions of how we could, clarify things. Laws, I think, should be simple, without a lot of exceptions, without a lot of room for misinterpretation. What we've got here, and especially as I look at the Title V, and it seems like there is a lot of room for confusion. And from my standpoint, again, a lot of it stems from what seems to be a desire to regulate a specific class of business or a specific class of vehicle. So, all right, that's my comment.
Thank you very much. And thanks for your presence here today.
Thank you very
much. Appreciate it. All right, is there anyone on Zoom who would like to make a comment? Are there any hands up? Doesn't look like it. Anyone else in the chamber like to comment? Yes, sir.
Thanks. Yeah, my name is Ben Burr. I'm the Executive Director of Blue Ribbon Coalition, and I just mostly have a few questions. I noticed one of the changes in Title V was the strike through of motor vehicles in Chapter 5.02 and the redefining that as just all-terrain vehicles. It's just not clear to me why that change was made. Additional clarification would be helpful.
Excuse me, could you, which part?
In the business licenses on Title V, you have a strike through where you're changing motor vehicles as a term and replacing it with all-terrain vehicles. And that's right up front in the definitions.
The reason is because the fleet inventory was the reason that the Jeep companies were included, and now that HB 146 removed that, the proposal is to narrow. The only thing 5.02 does now is that the business cap and the equipment affidavit, which is a unique ATV issue.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. I did have a question about the Title 5.03.010. It talks about related to condo rentals. There's still a fleet size limit there that those renting there has to be a sign telling them that they have to limit their fleet size to 6. That might be contrary to HB 146, and maybe you need to strike through that last sentence on that section.
Yeah, could you read that section again for me?
So 5.03.010. It would be at the very end, it says, and requests guests operate their ATVs in a manner which reduces noise in residential areas and on public lands, including driving the speed limit and limiting their caravan size to 6 ATVs. And so some of that might be coming from like a BLM requirement or something, which applies to commercial operators, but I don't know that there's any real statutory basis for requiring a group of private folks to limit their group size on their own. And so just a thought.
Nope.
Yeah, on BLM, but I'm talking about if they were to leave and drive on public roads in Moab or Grand County, that would be a different question.
No, that's appropriate. I'll strike through that last part and limiting blah, blah, blah.
Okay, thanks. I still have questions. I know that you guys aren't debating changing these, but the limits on the business licenses that will be allowed from 3 rental companies to 4 outfitters. That seems like a low number. I know there's at least 15 operating businesses in either Grand County or Moab, and I don't know if we're grandfathering in the existing businesses with that number, or if we're designating a handful of these businesses to have to go out of business by the passage of this ordinance. But it's also an interesting distinction between the rental and the outfitters, where we're distinguishing between rentals and outfitters here. We're distinguishing between rentals and outfitters in how the education materials get disseminated, but then there seems to be a whole lot of confusion about that distinction between those 2 groups in the tax code. And anyway, I just have questions about the merits of those distinctions being applied in all those different situations.
As to the number, Ben, that is all of the county ATV businesses. So that's vesting everyone who's here, and that's been the same number since April 2021. So none of that has changed. So the remaining businesses are in the city. We do have all that information that we could release publicly. And so that's just a status quo situation. In terms of the distinction, I'm happy to look at it again tomorrow.
Okay. I expressed these concerns back in February. I still have concerns that positioning the county to be regulating the marketing activities of companies seems problematic with the First Amendment. If you guys need to be regulatory jurisdiction over out of jurisdiction entities, that just seems like a weird way to find it.
We're not regulating the marketing. We're saying if you're marketing in Grand County, you're doing business, and it's specific to our special events process.
Sure. Okay.
So if you start your race in Fruita, but you're marketing Grand County to bring in Grand County folks to your Fruita race that ends in Grand County, but you're collecting the fees in Fruita, well, you're doing business in Grand County because you're marketing it to Grand County.
Sure, but let's say I rent ATVs out of Hanksville and I put a flyer in a hotel to market my ATV business. Does that mean if I'm registered to do business in Wayne County that I now also have to have a business to operate in Grand County because I put a flyer in a hotel?
No, we want nothing to do with that. So I'm happy to look at it again, but that's not the intent.
Thanks. I have questions about the purpose of the affidavit for the sales tax compliance. I asked accountants I know if that's common. They said not very often do they see that. And it seems that it's implied that you will be complying with the tax code anytime you're operating within a taxable jurisdiction. Adding an affidavit seems a little duplicative and unnecessary, but you guys clearly think you need it. I do think that the elevation of violations of some of these to being a Class B misdemeanor, or I believe in an earlier version of this, it was a Class C misdemeanor. I'd have to have you confirm that, but if that has happened, I would question the need to escalate the penalty on that. And that's everything I have.
That hasn't changed. It's always been.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the chamber? Scott, right?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thanks. My name's Scott McFarland, and I own High Point Hummer and ATV here in Moab. Been in business for 24 years doing this, so not new to taking care of the land and trying to take care of our community. I have a couple of questions also about sales tax. Number one, so just for the first quarter of this year, High Point paid $90,679 in sales tax. You've received $400. You guys have a leak. Where's our money? Where's our money, guys, that we are paying into Grand County? If you don't have it on your books, who does have it? That's one business, $90,000, and you're saying that you've got 400.
So just to clarify, that 400 was for the OHV specific. It's a new tax that started like a year or two ago. It wasn't all sales tax.
That was OHV. That's OHV rentals and tours, 90,000 in Q1. And I was going to tell you a little bit more about my business that I probably shouldn't, but that's 1 month of operations. That's not 3, because we weren't open for business the first 2 months. We didn't have any business. We didn't take any business. So I don't know who has the money, but that's one business. I want to know about all the other businesses that have paid into the tax commission, and Graham County doesn't have the money.
Christina, does it go to the state first, correct?
Yeah, we just get remittances from the
state.
I'm well aware that you get a small percentage of that. If you guys want to go over some more numbers, we can sit down and go over some more numbers another time. But I think what that's going to expose for you all is a lot more holes in Grand County's accounting.
I do want to clarify that we get a sales tax remittance, and that would be your general sales tax that would include our ATV businesses. And then just for Q1 of this year, we got, for the first time ever, the OHV sales tax, which is different than your motor vehicle tax, and it's different than your sales tax. Now we have an OHV tax, and that was the $489 remittance. The tax commission does not release any information about which businesses are paying taxes and which businesses are not.
So the OHV tax isn't a sales tax. What kind of tax is an OHV tax? I'm a little bit unclear.
It's a type of sales tax, but it is not the general sales tax that you've been paying. I have no idea. You might have been the business to give us $489 under the OHV tax. I have no idea. I did send through your attorney our ordinance 641 that spelled that out. I do have the statute in this Title V that references the motor vehicle taxes that are separate. So I'll certainly look at that again before tomorrow. And I recommend you do the same thing. So I'll certainly look at it also.
Yeah, I will. And also, just for the record, we use a really large accounting firm out of Salt Lake that does our stuff. So I also really like the idea, Christina, about having people be required to attend the tax courses. I think that's great. I think education is great. The education system that's coming out, and just a point of clarification, so the education rule that passed for OHV operators, that also has a requirement that not only do you watch a video, but then you also take a written test. And so we're going to great lengths to try and educate all public lands users. We're starting with OHVs, but we hope to go into mountain bikes, rock climbers, everyone that's out on public lands. The more education that we can give all of our public lands users, the better we'll be taking care of our public lands, the better stewards everyone can become. So we're very excited about this and working hard on it. And if anyone wants to help us out, let us know. Also, if we can have conversations about how other users out on public lands receive also an education about being good stewards while they're out there.
So who are you working with to create these educational outlets?
It's a committee put together by the state.
And what's the name of the
And
committee?
I'm just a member of that committee.
What's the name of the
I don't
committee?
even know if we've given it a name yet.
Okay.
The guys,
The no-name
that are
committee,
trying
eh?
to educate people.
So educators, eh?
And we are working with our responsible recreation committee and we hired a coordinator for that. We've started ambassador programs at both hiking and biking trailheads. So we've had a lot of outreach to those two communities as well. And we are looking at expanding that to the motorized community also.
Yeah, and that's great to have, I mean, somebody out there in person doing it. It's kind of expensive. Once we create this video and this testing program, you will receive a digital certificate. So if you're stopped by law enforcement or anyone else out on the trail, you'll be able to get out your phone and show them your license, that you've taken the test, you passed the test, you at least have that amount of knowledge. And hopefully all the users, once given that knowledge, will apply it, right? I mean, all of us that work out there, we all understand how it really goes. So, but we're very open to any additional ideas that you have on how to make that better. A lot of work is going into structuring this video. So
It's through the state.
it's through the state.
It's part of House Bill 180 that was generated within the outfitter community.
House Bill 180?
Education
Ah, right.
component of how.
Gotcha, right.
The Carl Albrecht's?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank
We
you.
worked with Carl Albrecht to try to initiate within the outfitter community and the OHV community responsible use. That's why it passed. Because that came within the outfitter and outfitter community.
And well, the industry started at the industry level. So I was only brought in once it went in front of the state legislature. So all the work that happened previous to that, I wasn't even privy to.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you for that. We like that work.
Great. Hopefully we can get the
Sure, if you'd like to, Quinn.
So the sales tax that we got that was $486, $489, that was a brand new tax that was implemented in January. It was the first payment we've received of that tax. I can assure you that all the taxes that you pay to the state that are supposed to be remitted to Grand Canada, the TRCC, the sales tax, those types of taxes, we get those every single month. This was a brand new tax that was implemented. In fact, when it showed up on our statement, we went, oh, that's that new tax. And so we, even as a county, we're trying to figure out why it was so low. But the total amount of sales tax that gets paid to the state is being remitted to Grand County properly. There's a lot of taxes that we get. There's several different ones every month. They go up and they go down. So those are definitely being remitted to us, and we're well aware of those. It was just this brand new one, this $486 that we think is being either underreported or I'm not sure. We need to check into it, but it is low. But the amount of taxes that get paid by businesses in Grand County are definitely, absolutely being remitted to us. And we have incredible track of all those. We're very aware of every single month. I have spreadsheets that go back years and years and years that show the fluctuations up and down in the winter and the summer. So those taxes are definitely being remitted to us. The fact that you paid X amount of taxes and we got a smaller amount in one tiny little tax absolutely does not mean those taxes are being lost. The taxes that you paid are being remitted to Grand County. It's just this new tax that was implemented in January that to us at first glance seems low. That's all.
Great, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, thank you, Quinn.
Thank you, Quinn. That was helpful.
Also something else that came to my attention recently, and you guys can cut me off if you want to.
No, speak.
But something else that came to my attention recently was that we're not quite sure what we have in certain budgets in the county. We're not sure how much money we have allocated for what. And once again, if we can look into that so that we have exact numbers, how much money is in what account and what's being used for.
Go ahead. You have the most.
Thanks, Quinn. Obviously, Gabriel Wojtek is the clerk auditor, so I don't want to step on his toes, but I can speak briefly to that with some past knowledge of it. I don't know how far back to go. I assume you're talking about the TRT. Are you talking about the TRT? Are you talking about
one that I'm
in total?
That's one that I'm personally familiar with.
Okay, and so I would, as to the public, because as the clerk auditor for years, I got this all the time. We have budget meetings that start in September and run all the way through December. We pass the final budget, and then in January, someone calls my office and says, I can't believe you guys budgeted this much for this. I can't believe you guys did this. I can't believe you guys did that. And my response to them is we have had meetings, literally open and public meetings, every single week since September through December to pass the budget for the next year. And we would encourage people to come and weigh in on those. Attendance to our budget meetings is virtually zero. So we welcome public input on those. We rarely get it. The TRT reports, those are generally tied to the numbers that come out with our audit at the end of the year, which actually this year will take place May 9th through the 12th. And so once we have those numbers finalized, we'll be able to submit that report to the state and those numbers will be readily available. And also we do have spreadsheets that we can share with the tribal council. Some of that reporting, I will admit, kind of got shuffled in COVID and kind of lapsed. But we have all the numbers. They haven't gone anywhere. They haven't changed dramatically. And we definitely have all those numbers. And we plan on submitting this report to the state as soon as we have our audit tied up, which should be mid-May.
Good. Yeah. Was there another question?
I was just going to say, I feel like we're straying from Title V here. And I think there's other folks that are waiting to talk. So
thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks for your time and thanks for your patience.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the input.
Jacques, if I could weigh in, I'm looking at the statute on these motor vehicle and OHV taxes, so I have some answers to some of the previous questions. We had one question about how is the OHV tax used, and that's all specified by statute what we can use it for. The statute is 59-12-603, subsection 2, limits our ability to use this revenue for anything other than financing tourism promotion and the development, operation, maintenance of, and it lists out 5 different types of facilities, including airports, conventions, cultural facilities, recreation facilities, and tourist facilities. So we will be using, it's very similar to the TRT, but it will be, used for those subsection 2. uses. And then it also specifies the OHV tax is separate in addition to the motor vehicle tax. And both of these taxes are separate in addition to all other sales and use taxes. That's all specified in subsection 1. So it is in addition to each of those taxes builds.
Okay, so there's a standard sales tax, then a motor vehicle tax on top of that, and then an OHV tax on top of that.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions from the chamber? Anyone, any comments? How about on Zoom? Anyone else care to speak on Zoom? Doesn't appear that there's any other comments. Any further discussion in here?
So I'm going to review a couple of things in Title V, the distinction between the rental and the tour companies, which is how we initially drafted the ordinance almost 18 months ago. So I'm going to look at that again. I'm not sure that I'm going to recommend any changes, but maybe. And then I'm also going to look at that definition of the business per the discussion today. But is there anything else the commission has questions or concerns on, so we can make sure Title V is getting to you tomorrow in as final form as possible?
Any other questions for Christina?
No, I think most of the revisions that came up for me were kind of handled already. So this version looks like it's fairly close, besides these clarifications you just mentioned.
All right, thanks. So just to remind everybody, this will be an action. The Title V will be an action item on tomorrow's regular commission agenda.
Do you know
Which
Item J.
Okay. All right. I will adjourn this workshop and thank you everybody for